This morning we're going to be reading out of Ephesians 4:17 through 24. The Lord says this, "So I tell you this and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. That, however, is not the way of life you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and in holiness." Let me pray real quick, guys. Lord, like Dan said this morning, personally and in worship, I just pray for the Spirit to guide me and to guide everyone here today, Lord. Watch over us. Speak through me today, Lord. I just thank you for this opportunity and just bless us today. In your name, amen. When Pastor Scott approached Jeff and myself about speaking this morning, I did the most Christian thing I could possibly do, and that was to throw Jeff under the bus immediately. We were over at the house, and it was after our group, and Scott and Jeff was on one side of the table, and I was on the other side, and Scott said, "Jeff, Jason, would either one of you be interested in speaking on the 4th or the 11th? I immediately spoke up. I was like, you know what, if I could do it, I'll take the later date. I mean, I was talking so fast. And then I looked at Jeff and I said, "Jeff, I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but if I do it, can I take the later date?" Now, anybody can tell you that if you preface a statement with, "I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but," it means you're about to throw somebody under the bus. So what happened was I immediately let my fear, my pride, and my ego get in the way. Because my first thought was, you know what? I want enough time that I can go in there and dominate this thing. I just want to go in there and I want it to be awesome for all the wrong reasons. So I let my competitive spirit take over. Or is Mark and Monica here today? All right, well, I'm kind of glad. They can attest to my competitive nature, and I'll tell you guys a story. A couple of months back, we were at a family reunion, and I somehow managed to turn a friendly game of wiffle ball versus a bunch of 10 to 14-year-olds into a contact sport, okay? Chase and Pierce, if you do see this, I do apologize for my actions. By the way, if anybody is wondering, I did go 4 for 4 with 2 homers in that game. Like any good job, the first thing that you do is perform a background check, and as it is relevant to what I'm talking about this morning, I kind of want to give you guys a background check on me. I do not say this because I want pity from anybody. I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. The Lord He's blessed me and delivered me from so much. I come from a pretend-to-be middle-class family. We were poor. My mother was and still is a drug addict. My brother is a career criminal, and he is still in his active addiction. My father was an alcoholic, and he has been sober for about 20 years now. Needless to say, I come from a very abusive home. I have experienced every kind of abuse known to man: physical, emotional, sexual, spiritual, neglect, and abandonment. I've witnessed domestic violence, and I have even been unjustly incarcerated 3 times, all before the age of 13 years old. I've lived with 11 different families, and I've been homeless. When I was 26 years old, God gave me a moment of clarity, and I took it. I moved from one state to another within 8 hours of me getting sober. For the next 7 years of my life, I did every kind of therapy I knew to do. For the first 20 months, I did scream therapy. If you know anything about scream therapy, all you do is just scream. It is very simple. I did it for about 3 hours a night. I have fought and I have clawed for every bit of my existence. About 5 years into my journey with the Lord, I had 3 gentlemen on 3 separate occasions tell me the exact same thing. Jason, you were the angriest individual I have ever met in my entire life. Like Megan spoke about last week, we are blessed to work at an inpatient rehab facility over at Allenwood. I have nicknamed it the Ellis Island of rehabs. We take anybody. There are the standard people who have just, simple drug addictions and things like that, all the way to difficult cases, people on Megan's Law, people who have sexually assaulted people, things like that. My job specifically is a therapist, and I get the most difficult cases. Me and another gentleman on the facility, we get the most difficult cases. And I know this, it would be very hypocritical of me not to be standing up here today teaching what I know. I joke with my guys all the time when they tell me, Jason, I have no idea how to live life. And I say, well, you have a playbook on how not to. And so do I. We think, we feel, we do. Studies I have read show that the average person processes in the neighborhood of 60,000 thoughts a day, sometimes higher. These same studies show that 75 to 85% of these thoughts are negative. Where do these thoughts come from? When I was writing this, the first example, and I'm just going to go with my instinct, is when Peter denied Jesus, where moments before he cut a man's ear off, because in my mind, he instinctively thought, you ain't touching my God. But here's what happened. Here's what I think happened. Peter became physically separated from his God. Doubt began to creep in. Uncertainty filled his heart, and with uncertainty filled his heart with fear, and then the words came out of his mouth. I believe the answer to be fear. These are some of the things that I fear. Fear of not having control over what people think about me. Fear I can not control people. Fear of looking weak. My senior year in high school, my dad groomed me to be a baseball player. He taught me 2 things in life. One, how to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, and how to throw a ball. My senior year in high school, I weighed about 135 pounds, and I was about 5'8". I was voted the #1 catcher in the entire state of Georgia. I was voted to 3 all-star teams, and I was even invited to try out for the Atlanta Braves. My father, to this date, has never once told me that he was proud of me. Fear of not feeling worthy of love. Fear of abandonment. Fear of neglect. Fear of being hurt. Fear of infidelity. Fear of not feeling good enough in general. Fear of not having control. Fear of the unknown. For example, there once was a criminal who had committed a crime because, hey, that's what criminals do. That's their job. Anyway, he was sent to the king for punishment. The king told him he had the choice of 2 punishments. He could be hung by a rope or take what's behind the big, dark, scary, mysterious iron door. The criminal quickly decided on the rope. As the noose was being slipped on him, he turned to the king and he asked, by the way, out of curiosity, what's behind the door? The king laughed and said, it's funny. I offer everyone the same choice, and nearly everyone picks the rope. So, said the criminal, tell me, what's behind the door? I mean, obviously, I'm not going to tell anybody, pointing to the noose. The king paused, then answered, freedom. But it seems most people are so afraid of the unknown that they immediately take the rope. A French philosopher said it best when he said, my life has been filled with terrible misfortune, most of which has never happened. How much time do we spend fearing things that might happen over the reality at hand? This stat right here was astounding when I read it. It says that it has been proven that 85% of the fears that we have never come to light. 85% of the things that we fear never happen, guys. One of my favorite motivational speakers is a guy by the name of Zig Ziglar. Anybody ever heard of Zig Ziglar before? Love that dude. He's from the South, so he and I share a lot in common. The first thing is we both speak correct English. Zig tells a story about a wife and a lawyer. He says, a lady down in Dallas went to see her attorney about a divorce. The lawyer asked, what is the problem? She started rambling, and he said, no, be specific. She said, like how? The lawyer asked, do you have any grounds? She says, why, yes. As a matter of fact, we have about 40 acres here on the north end of town. He said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. The lawyer asked, do you have a grudge? She said, no, but we got a neat little carport there right on the side of the house. He said, woman, we need to make this personal. She said, like how? He said, does the man ever beat you up? She said, no, I'm up every morning for about an hour or two before he ever turns over. He said, ma'am, do you accept any responsibility for the problems in the marriage? She said, well, like how? Well, do you ever wake up grumpy? She says, no, I just let him get up on his own. And he said, well, why do you want to divorce the man? She said, well, the guy just can't communicate. What are we communicating? Husbands, what are we communicating with our wives? Wives, what are we communicating with our husbands? Husbands, what if every morning you woke up, you rolled over and you tapped your wife on the nose and you said, boy, I could have done better. More serious, what if you've been saying that all along? What if there's a season in your life where all hell breaks loose and all you can think is this is never going to work? Ziglar goes on to say this. He says, many marriages would be better if the husband and wife clearly understood they're on the same side. Are we speaking life or death into our marriages? Are we speaking life or death into our children? I truly believe the words we direct towards our children are imperative to how they turn out and whether they choose to follow Christ or not. Let's play the hypothetical game for a second. Let's say every day I go pick my little girl up, and on the way home I don't say a word to her. She says something, I ask her to be quiet. We get home, I separate myself from my family. I'm always angry, I'm discontent. Discontentment is just pouring out of me every single day. And I am just one angry man. I am just a bad person in general. And then every Sunday morning I say, sweetheart, go get your Sunday best on and let's go worship God. Why would I want to follow that? One study that I did read said this, and this made me laugh and cry at the same time. It says that they did a poll of 95%. They did a poll of the prison population, and it says this, that 95% of the prison population had their parents tell them as they were growing up, if you keep acting like this, you will wind up in prison. Here's the solution part. Philippians 4:8-9 says this, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. This is a solution-based message. Where I work at, one of the things that we do every day as therapists is we do intake assessments with the guys who come up. And it's generally all about the same. For example, a guy will walk into my office and we'll do the questionnaire, and then they'll ask for a phone call. They'll get on the phone and they're broken. they've hit the bottom of the barrel in their life, and they'll call, and most of the time it's to the person that they've hurt the most, to their mom, significant other, wives, children, things like that. And when they get off the phone, they're usually crying. And I tell everybody the same thing. You have for the rest of the night to wallow in self-pity for the things that you've done, but come tomorrow, we're going to go to work. If you read the New Testament and the parables, Jesus was a solution-based person. He did not spend time on what you've done. It's where you're going. Around 1950, there was a man that was reported as being the happiest man in America. This story changed my life. I'm assuming it was, who was the talk show host back in the 50s? Like Dick Clark? Was he the only one? Anybody? Yeah. So back in the day, this man, he's on a talk show, and he's reported as being the happiest man. So after about 2 minutes of them doing the interview, the guy finally gets to the question, and he says, "What is your secret? How is it that you are the happiest man in America?" And the guy said this. He said, "Man, it's no more common than the nose at the end of your face. I simply wake up every single morning, and I choose to be happy." Of course, the book I was reading at the time, I threw it on the floor, had to go pick it up, read it again, threw it on the floor, back and forth with this book because I was so angry that it was not kind of like Good Will Hunting where there was an equation on the wall where you had to figure it out. How is it that it is this simple? So out of frustration, I finally just said, you know what, I'm going to try it. It can't hurt anything. Every day, including this morning, this is what I do. I wake up, and for the first 90 seconds of my day, I do not do anything. I lay in the bed, and I choose to be happy. Now, I know everybody's mind works different, but let me tell you what the picture in my mind looks like. For some reason, it's a dirt path to the left, a dirt path to the right, and right in the middle of my picture is the Keebler elf tree. The right is good, the left is bad, and sometimes the Keebler elf will poke his head out the door and point me to the right. And that's what I do every single morning. Remember, negative thinking does not provide any solutions to the problem. Establishing new habits. I'm probably going to hurt some feelings right now, but that's okay. Put the phone down. Put the tablet down. I was in Hawaii a couple of months ago, and I was talking to a personal trainer, and I too was certified back in the day. And we were kind of comparing notes. We were talking about the population he works with and what he does specifically these days. And he told me, he said, you know, Jason, I focus on stretching. And I was like, wow, a lot of money in that sort of thing. And he said, yeah. And I said, yeah, you got a lot of people who come in and they have back problems and stuff like that. And he goes, no. And he dropped his head. And he said, more people have neck problems now from looking at their phones and tablets than he has ever seen in his entire life. That struck me, and it opened my eyes to the next thing. So the missus and I were in Altoona not too long ago, and we're at Texas Roadhouse. Of course, everybody's wanting to get in there and eat the bread, so there's like a 20 or 30-minute wait. So we go to the peanut gallery, and we're sitting in the lobby, and we're tossing peanuts on the floor, and I look up, and there's about 20 people in the room. And so I kind of did a head count, and there was four kids in the room, 4 kids who should not have phones. So I did a count, there were 16 people in the room. 12 people had their phones out. 75% of the people that were in that lobby had their phones out. And everybody was either with their family, their wives, significant others, or girlfriends. So to further the investigation, because my curiosity was piqued at this point, we had a meeting. We have daily meetings where we work out, and afterwards we'll go out to the gazebo and we'll all talk. So a group of people they were sitting out in the gazebo one day, and I had to pose this question. I asked if the news was similar to Facebook. Now, the reason that I asked this question was, one, I wanted to continue to affirm my bias that I already have towards Facebook. And the second thing is I wanted to continue justifying not having an account. So here's what I asked. I said, So then I said to Facebook, please tell me if it's similar to this. Because to me, the news, it's 24 minutes long, 6 minutes of commercials. 16 minutes are filled with horror. There's 3 minutes of weather, 3 minutes of sports. And if there's a brawl in the sports, like on the rink, or there's a brawl in the baseball field, they'll show that as well. And the last segment is usually something along the lines of straight from the heart, or they give an update on local panda birthings. Basically, it's 75 to 85% garbage. All of them said yes. At the end, every single person justified it with a head nod by saying this, but it is a really good way of keeping up with people you have not seen in a long time. Let me tell you what I think I say to my significant other if we're out to dinner and I've got my phone out. I'd rather be somewhere else, and you're not that interesting. Seek out positive people. If you are the smartest person in your group, find a different group. Make positive self-talk a habit. This is a true story of a French Olympic player, Guy Drut. In the summer of '76, he was the only chance France had to win an Olympic track and field medal. Naturally, he was afraid. He had the burden of carrying a nation's pride on his shoulder. One of his friends, Jean-Claude Killy, advised him how to overcome the fear of failure. Killy's advice was simple. Killy advised Drut to repeat a few words in his mind over and over again. Killy told Drut that he was the only one who could use his body and mind for peak performance. He should keep on saying to himself, I have done everything to get ready for this race, and if I win, everything will be great. But even if I don't win, my friends will still be my friends, my enemies will still be my enemies, and the world will still be the same. Drut says that he took Killy's advice to heart. He repeated this sentence in all of his practice exercises, during breaks, and in between the semifinals and the finals. He kept saying the sentences to himself over and over, and it blocked out everything else. Drut says, I kept on repeating it to such an extent that I was still repeating it when I went up to receive the gold medal. Learn to forgive yourself. On the back end of the background check that I gave you guys, I've done a lot of horrible things in my life. I have hurt a lot of people. I've caused a lot of damage. I have fought. I have stolen. I've done a lot of bad things. About 10 years into my sobriety, when I was 36 years old, I had a job in South Carolina where my dad worked, same city. Called my dad and I said, hey, Pops, I'm going to be in town. And he says, why don't you come over to the house? Why don't you stay at the house? Okay, that sounds good. So the work I was doing was all third shift work, and I get back to his house about 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and naturally they're getting up and they're going to work. And points me to the guest room, and then they bolt. So as I'm sitting there dripping, I'm like, okay, well, let me go find the shower. So I come out the room, and I go to the first door, and I turn, and it's locked. Go to the next door, and I turn the handle, and it's locked. Go to the third door, turn the handle, and it's locked. And I remember at that moment, I was presented clearly with two choices. The first choice was this: how dare you lock these doors after what you've done to me? For the past 10 years, I have not asked anything from you, not one single thing. And then the second choice came up, and it simply said, you've earned this. I bowed my head, I lifted it up, I laughed it off, and I found the fourth door, and I took a shower. I have no control over what people, whether they forgive me, whether they don't forgive me. The only thing I can control is me. Learn to laugh. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. I love clean comedians. Jim Gaffigan is so funny to me. Brian Regan is so funny to me. And the other thing I was going to really suggest today is guys, find people who are free. Find people who surround yourself with people who, just seem free, who laugh. Become intentional about your attitude. One of the best quotes I have ever read in my life comes from Dr. Norman Peale. He says, attitude is more important than facts. Every challenge, every battle, every temptation you face can be dictated by your perspective. I'm going to tell a story about my little girl now. About a year ago, we were, you can't ruin this story, okay? Don't laugh out loud. So about a year ago, we're leaving church, and her mom she's really good at encouraging our little one to earn things. So we were leaving church last year, and Megan and I, it was right before school started, and Megan had bought everything that she needed for school, but Elizabeth wanted some stuff. And her mom said, you know what? She was like, think of some ways that you can actually earn this money. Okay. So we go back to Megan's place, and Megan and I are sitting on the couch and we're watching a movie. And Elizabeth comes out about 15 minutes after we get there, and she says, hey, can I go outside and play? Yeah, sure, go ahead. Be careful. So about 20, 30 minutes go by. Megan gets up and she walks into the kitchen for something. And Elizabeth comes stomping up the steps, and she pops through the door and she says, I made $7. My parental instinct radar went off, and I stood up off the couch, and I'm like, so Megan comes walking in from the kitchen, and we've got her flanked. And I look at Elizabeth, and she's got $7 in one hand, and she's got a sign in the other hand. And her mom says, where did you get $7? Flips the sign over, and it has a sign written out, need money for school supplies. Our little girl can now put on her resume, panhandler. Yeah. But in that moment, I learned something really, really amazing about my woman. In the moment of fire, here's what Megan said to her. And I know that she was upset because I was just standing there with owl eyes. I was just like, wow. Megan prefaced her next statement with this. That is a very good idea, but you are never to do that again. It is super dangerous. Does anybody here work for children and youth services? Good, because I was going to say that was a figure of speech. Yeah. Stop self-sabotaging the life God intended for you to have and change your perspective. I did not plan on showing a video today, but Megan actually showed me this, and as soon as she showed me this video, I said, that's going in. I get emotional about two things in this life, my girls and God. Matt, can you play it up? When I first watched that, the very first thought I had was, what an awesome attitude that woman has. She probably has so many opportunities to let the circumstances dictate how she looks at this entire situation. She chooses not. When I was 36 years old, I went and saw a therapist, and if you know anything about therapy, generally what happens is you'll sit across from the man or the woman, and for the first 30 or 45 minutes, however long it takes, you'll just tell them the story of why you're there and what you've been through in life. So for 30 minutes, I just rambled on about everything from start to finish about my life at this man. And at the end of it, he leans over, very serious, and he says this. He says, Jason, you're 5%. I looked at him perplexed, and I said, what does that mean? He said, 95% of the people who have gone through what you've been through in this life are either dead or they're in prison. In closing, since I began this journey of changing my thinking, dating back to a year ago, I've had 3 men on 3 separate occasions all say the exact same thing to me. I want what you have. When they followed up with what they meant, they all said the same thing. You just seem like you were free. Finally, ask yourself this question this week. Are we living like a king died for us? Thank you for letting me share today. Let me pray real quick, please. Lord, just thank you for your words today, Lord. Uh, I'm just in awe of where you can bring people, Lord, and I thank you for this body. I thank you for my significant other. I'm so happy that she got to come today. It was such a warm blessing, Lord. Just guide us in our thoughts, Lord, this week. If we are thinking negative, if we are pessimists, Lord, I don't think that you want us to live like that. It starts in our mind and the words flow out of our heart, Lord. Strengthen us this week. In your name, amen.